Steve Bannon just said that Donald Trump can get around the 22nd Amendment to the Constitution and be president in 2028. Is he right? All depends on what you think the Constitution is and what you think America is. Hey folks, I'm Tad Sturmer. I'm a scholar of resistance history at the University of Southern Denmark and the author of A Resistance History of the United States. Steve Bannon told The Economist that Trump will be president again in 2028, that there is a way around the 22nd Amendment, and that the Constitution, though, is fit for purpose. How can both of these things be true? That the 22nd Amendment doesn't work, but the Constitution does? That all sounds crazy until you understand what the hard right means by the Constitution, and by extension, what they mean by America, and who Americans are, and which Americans count. Bannon and the hard right revere the Founders' Constitution, not the document as it exists now. That document is something that the founders would have hated, and that's part of the point. What they care about is the Republic as it was designed in 1787. They revere the small group of white nationalists who wrote it and believe that their intent should govern everything, every day. In that sense, it's a living document because those folks are being dragged out of their graves to breathe life into your world. And that's what originalism means in practice. The founders' choices are what matter, not what came later, not your choices. And by that intent, presidents had no term limits. The framers deliberately chose not to limit presidential terms. They debated it at the Constitutional Convention and they rejected it. Their design assumed power would stay with men just like them, white, Protestant, propertied, regulated more or less by social arrangement, by the establishment that they created, not law. Washington did set a two-term precedent by choice in 1797, but that was just a custom, not any kind of constitutional requirement. Because the system functioned on the assumption that the right kind of people would always hold power and exercise restraint on their own personal power just by passing it off to somebody else just like them. That's the republic Bannon means when he says the Constitution was fit for purpose. One where presidential authority isn't legally constrained because it doesn't have to be. The founders built it that way. Now, the 22nd Amendment did provide limits on it, but it didn't appear until 1951. So Franklin Roosevelt won 4 terms, 1932, 1936, 1940, 1944, but he died in office in April 1945, not too far into that last term. And then a Republican Congress proposed the amendment in 1947, and it was ratified 4 years later. That's 164 years after the Constitution was written. Not part of the founders' design. It's a modern addition that directly contradicts what the founders built, and that's the logic of the hard right. The founders chose no term limits, the 22nd Amendment imposes them, and the 22nd Amendment should be interpreted not in terms of the framers of that document, of that amendment, but it should be interpreted in light of what the original founders meant. And that's why Bannon's logic works for those people. When Bannon says there is a way around the Second Amendment, he's not describing some sort of loophole. He's saying it has no legitimacy because it contradicts the founders' intent. Originalism basically means you follow what the framers designed. They designed a system with no presidential term limits. The 22nd Amendment violates that design. Therefore, from an originalist position, it shouldn't govern. And that's not interpretation. That's the logic of original intent taken to its conclusion. So the founders' Constitution concentrated power among white Protestant nationalists who owned property. The Senate, the Electoral College, filtered representation, that was infrastructure for their authority, protecting against the tyranny of the majority, the tyranny of you. And included slavery as foundational structure, women as legal dependents, indigenous people as obstacles to be removed, property requirements for voting, violence as enforcement. And that system worked exactly as designed for the people it was built for 80 years. So when Bannon says the Constitution is fit for purpose, he means that purpose, the founders' purpose. The hard right sees everything after as deviation. Reconstruction amendments that expanded citizenship, federal enforcement of rights, voting rights expansion, presidential term limits. None of that was part of the original design. All of it can be treated as illegitimate structure imposed on the founders' republic by doing what? By creating a multiracial democracy. But restoration means returning to what the framers built. A presidency without term limits, federal power that doesn't enforce rights against states, citizenship as the founders defined it. Steve Bannon isn't guessing. He's describing a constitutional vision where the founders' choices override everything that came after. The founders chose no term limits. By that logic, the 22nd Amendment has no authority. If you think the founders got it right, If you're the kind of person that republic was built for, then yes, the Constitution is fit for purpose. But if your rights came from breaking that design, from breaking that republic, from the destruction of what it is they created, then you know exactly what going back to it might mean.